All right, we're recording and we should be live. Blast off in 3, 2, 1. And let's see here. So it should show up on your Facebook here shortly on Building Bellingham. And then let's, oops. All right, did it pop up there for you?
Not yet. Still showing the latest one was you and Mr. Youssef from My Traffic Man.
Have you met Ziad?
No, haven't needed his services.
Yes, he's
But
good. I'm a lead foot.
Yeah, I used to be. Those days are gone.
Yeah, now you're more patient with driving.
Now I just don't care.
Yeah, you don't care how long it takes for you to get somewhere.
No, that's why I moved out to Semiahmoo.
There we go. Awesome. Has that popped up yet for you?
Nope.
Here, try refreshing the page really quickly here.
Okay.
Lead foot. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, it's up, but it won't. Doesn't have a share button yet. Just has the watch video.
So if you scroll down a little bit, it should show up as a second video there. That's what. No share button yet?
No.
No worries. Let's just get rolling with this. If you want to just get out of that, we'll get rolling. So, Rob Lee, thank you for joining me here on the Building Bellingham Pivot Series. Where are you videoing in here from?
From my home office up in Semiahmoo. We just moved into a new development up there called Sea Smoke. And my wife has the front part of the house where she does her work as a teacher's aide. So they're Zooming as their team, most of the week, and I run the Builders Industry Association from afar from here in the front bedroom.
Awesome. So you have good, you have the opportunity to be in the same place, convene when you want to, but also have your separation, which must be nice.
Exactly. Yeah, and she usually steals. We have a pretty great outdoor living space and a sectional sofa out there, and she usually sets up shop there. She beats me to it in the morning, so she's really enjoying that part of the house.
That's awesome. So you're with the Builders Industry Association of Whatcom County. Tell me a little bit more about what that is, what you do, and how that's been affected.
Yeah, absolutely. We're an industry trade association that serves primarily residential home builders and developers. And we're part of a larger group. So when you join as a builder, you get membership in the state Builders Industry Association as well as the National Association of Home Builders. And so between those three organizations, we offer some pretty robust insurance programs, a retro program for return on industrial insurance. We can get you health care through our health trust. But we also have a pretty robust government affairs department in all three agencies. And so we lobby at the local level, at the state level, and at the national level to try and protect the industry and advance it. Because we believe that home ownership for everyone is good, and we're in the middle of certainly a local housing crisis, but it really reaches all the way out nationally.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys have been lobbying pretty hard recently. I know I signed a petition and was getting that to as many people as possible. Tell me a little bit more about. So Governor Inslee basically said, "Stop everything. We're halting everything, right? New construction is not deemed essential." And how did that impact, your members? and people that are within your world, but may not be members, but within the building world. How did that affect them, and what has changed since?
Well, it was huge. Anytime you turn the taps off, essentially overnight in any industry where people can't, you know, continue on projects that they've had meet contracts, you know, in your world, you guys were impacted severely because you couldn't get closings, because you couldn't get, you know, the houses were probably 99% done, but they couldn't get in to get the last two or three things done, or final inspection, or, you know, you name it. It just sort of shut everything down overnight. So for a lot of our members and a lot of folks in the industry, they're built up of small companies, you know, 0 to 10 or 12 employees. And so all of a sudden you've got members in the building community that have bills still coming in, but they can't bill for anything because no work is happening.
Right.
So associations like ours, you know, we jumped into the fray to try and work with the governor to show him that residential construction, specifically on our end, is essential. That you know, you can't shelter in place without a shelter.
Right.
And we have, you know, a lack of inventory, and so having us stop building isn't helping people shelter. So we tried really hard to work with the governor, and for a long time it just fell on deaf ears. He did let a few construction programs go. They were generally large union projects, which really didn't set well with us, because they're essentially doing the same thing we're doing. They're on job sites, and they were able to convince them that they could work safely distanced and still not only protect employees and their families and our clients, but, you know, that they could continue building. And so the BIAWC, Builders Industry Association of Washington, Associated General Contractors, ABC, and 2 or 3 union groups were asked to join a work group. And so we did, and the idea was to come up with robust safety measures so that we could go back to work. And that was delivered to the governor's office a week ago. Well, it'll be 2 weeks ago this Tuesday. And we hadn't heard anything. It was really disheartening, because anytime you get that disseparate a group of people together that generally don't agree on a lot, and they agreed on everything in the plan, they did a really great job of coming together. To have it sort of just pushed to the side was frustrating. But the governor, at some point in this past week, looked at the data and looked at the plan that we had and said, okay, we think we can go back to work safely and see what happens. And so he announced yesterday that immediately builders, anybody in the construction industry, could go back to work on an existing project. So if you had broken ground, you could continue with all of these, you know, robust safety measures in place, and having shown that you've trained your team, and that we're checking temperatures and all those sorts of things. So that was phase 1, which we had some members go back to work yesterday that had all the PPE and all those things in place, and so they were back on the job getting things done. Most will go back Monday, because it took them all weekend to you know, sift through all the requirements, make sure that they had the PPE for their employees, and then also, you know, get hold of their employees, because some of the employees who've been you know, on unemployment aren't necessarily in town. You know, they decided to shelter in place elsewhere, and so, you know, a lot of them are getting the word out, just trying to get their guys and gals back in place by Monday or Tuesday. So that's phase 1. Basically, if you've broken ground, you can continue. Phase 2, the work group met Friday afternoon after the governor's declaration to tie up some loose ends on getting new projects back. So if you have permit pulled, and you know, say like up here at Sea Smoke, in the development I live in, there's a number of empty lots. If a builder has a permit already, he can go and break ground once the governor has looked at the few remaining things they've got to work out. So we're hopeful that by early to middle of next week, we'll have phase 2 in place, and that'll take care of just about everybody in the industry. There's still a few folks with land use issues that are in planning, but that's a whole nother deal, and that's more of a city or county issue of them just getting back up to speed, because they've all been working from home and doing plan reviews from home and those sorts of things.
Yeah. And how important, and I know that you and I may be a little biased on this subject, but how important in a market like Whatcom County, where inventory is already, I mean, we have 2.6, I think it was 2.4 months of inventory,
Right.
which is incredibly low.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very much a seller's market. It doesn't help the buyer find, something to buy. People are a little bit uneasy about maybe listing their home because they don't know where they're going to go. And then there's this uncertainty of COVID. How important is new construction, vacant new construction, to stimulate that market?
Right. Well, there's a bit of a misnomer out there, because everybody, when they think of new construction, they think, well, I can't afford, new construction. It's not affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the whole idea of always having new inventory is so that folks that maybe started in a condo can, bump up to their first home. And the people they're buying from who'd been in the first home for a while are looking, for a bigger home, because they've maybe got a couple more kids than they had when they bought their first home. And so it's this leapfrog sort of up, if you will, towards, a new home. And if you don't have those new homes, you have that whole process stagnating, where people just aren't able, the folks that want to expand, or that maybe they've done a remodel and doing another one doesn't excite them, so they're like, I just want to buy new. If there's nothing new to buy, then all it does is make the competition for the things that are available, really hot. And you've seen that, and that's no fun for anybody. Even the builders don't like that. My members that are new home construction folks and developers, they really want to take care of their clients. They don't want to sting them. They don't want to, they just want to sell it at a good price and then move on to the next one, so that they can take care of that need. So when we don't have new home construction, it puts the squeeze on the middle and the lower end, or the entry level end of the market.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, and we're talking about anywhere in that high 3 to mid 4, which is kind of our entry level price point in Whatcom County now, and it drives that up. And then you hear that conversation over and over, which is, I can't afford to live here anymore. So we're driving, good people out of Whatcom County because of that, as a result, right?
Correct. Yeah. And we've struggled for a number of years to continue using the term affordable housing, because we're just not sure that's a truism anymore. We've shifted more to attainable housing. What's attainable for folks, and so our builders are in some of the cities are doing really well getting attainable housing and being able to find lots at good prices. There's other cities in our county, namely Bellingham, that are really hard for all kinds of reasons, not just city government. You've got neighborhood associations that don't want certain types of housing, in their neighborhood. So it's a very complex issue. And when you take out brand new houses, it just makes it that more complex and that much tougher to get people excited about home ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. And that word attainable housing, where have you seen, what part of Whatcom County have you seen the most attainable housing, in your opinion?
Well, certainly Sudden Valley has always been sort of a spot where a lot of people jump in, for their first home. We just moved away from Sudden Valley after being there 14 years. I used to run a camp out on Lake Whatcom that was very close to Sudden Valley, so it worked really well for us. But that's one of the spots. Certainly you have to go out to some of the smaller cities, Everson, Nooksack, Sumas, some of those places to get even under what you quoted, right? The mid threes to mid fours, because that's still a big number for a lot of folks. You've got to have been a 2-family income, and you've had to have been smart for a number of years, right? To maybe live off one income and save the other. And just there's not a lot of folks that are able to do that or have thought that far ahead. So for them, even a 350 is a big number. So certainly Sudden Valley, you can find some entry level stuff in some of the smaller cities, but then you're driving,
Right.
Driving into town, and of course if you've grown up in Bellingham, anything further than a 10-minute drive, you've got to pack a lunch and get an oil change for the car because it's just too far.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And what are you seeing in cities like Ferndale and Blaine and Linden? Because I know that we just touched on lightly that Bellingham can be quite difficult as far as, well, I guess urban planning. How have those cities stepped up in your eyes to make a step in that direction towards creating more inventory and working with the builders here in Whatcom County?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with the developers. The developers have found it easier to work in some of the northern cities, whether it's Ferndale or Linden. Both of those have, the last 2 years, have had really robust new home construction numbers. And some of it's the city governments. Certainly Linden has been leading the charge. They were enticing builders to go back to work well before Governor Inslee changed direction on that. So I think that's a huge part of it. They've also got a lot more available land supply and are excited about utilizing that and developing it and those sorts of things. And certainly developers, when they can find a big piece of land, like say Malloy Terrace would be a good example up in Ferndale. Lot of units potentially going in there, as they build out the different phases. And Ferndale's planned ahead for it too, in terms of schools and infrastructure and those sorts of things. So it isn't something that they just sort of woke up one day and turned the switch on. I think they've been planning for it for a while.
Yeah.
Now there's still frustrations. There's always going to be, builders want to build and build fast, and not that they sacrifice quality, but they want to have houses in the pipeline, and sometimes planning departments and various folks that get to speak into the process can slow things down or make it more expensive with impact fees and all those sorts of things. And so we try and advocate for as little increase in those impact fees as possible, or permit fees, or whatever it is, because that just adds to our clients' bottom line.
Absolutely. And what's the healthy balance? I mean, you and I, we both live in Whatcom County, and there's a lot of people that are watching this live in Whatcom County or will watch this live in Whatcom County. What's the healthy balance between more inventory and then maintaining this? I mean, I love where we live because of the natural, outdoor beauty, and you get that a lot up in Seasmoke and Semiahmoo. There's so many places like that in Whatcom County. How do you, in your position, how do you advocate for both?
Well, absolutely. It's a bit of a tightrope for sure, because we do live in a very progressive county in a very progressive state, and as you run into and meet builders and developers, they tend to be very conservative, fiscally, in their beliefs, in their politics, all those things. And yet we find ourselves in a college town, which can tend to be more progressive. And so our members are committed to not only having robust personal businesses, but any of the things that our city and county decide are important in terms of the environment, in terms of how we mitigate, how many trees we plant. I mean, all those things, they're for it. We're not going to buck those things necessarily. Now, if there's things that say get rushed through, city and county government where we feel like the public has been duped a little bit, we certainly stand up for those things, but it doesn't mean that we're necessarily against it. Generally, it's because the process has been bad, and we feel like, the common man, the common homeowner, landowner, just doesn't know certain things are happening. And so we also want to stand up for property owner rights in the middle of all that. But we all live and are raising our families in Whatcom County. So we love, the parks. We love the waterfront in Bellingham. I mean, I think we can have a really cool waterfront when we get finished developing that. I'd put it up against anywhere in the world, to go hang out by the ocean and have, cool restaurants and coffee shops and beer places and oh, hey, the trail that you can walk 9 miles on this trail that connects all from one end of the bay to the other end of the bay. I mean, those are all fantastic things. Our members are for it. They've chosen to stay in Bellingham, in Whatcom County, because of our lifestyle and what it affords.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. There's got to be some sort of progression towards maybe more along the lines of enhancing versus changing. We don't want to change where we live. We want to enhance it. So for those of the people that are watching this show that aren't super familiar with the process of taking a piece of land all the way through the point where they see a home on that piece of land, it's the entitlements. Maybe if you could just touch on, like, developers aren't necessarily all encompassing of all of those. What's the difference between a horizontal developer, a builder, a financier? How do they all fit into? And are some people all encompassing, or is it usually, are they usually separate roles?
Sure. Well, there's some developers that just come in, buy raw land, and do all the work with the city or county governments to get services in, roads in, do all the designs, get the number of lots that they're allowed to put on, those sorts of things. And then they'll sell the individual lots off to builders and then move on. Generally, those are national type companies. And we don't have very many in Whatcom County because it's frankly, it's just too hard to get it done in this county. So some of the bigger players, say down in the Seattle area, that you see, advertisements for, and I can't think of any right now, but I know one had a lot of land in Cordata and just threw their hands up in the air and sold the lots off and moved out because they just couldn't do it. So in Whatcom County, we have more of the type of developer that will buy a piece of raw land, put all the money into, doing the designs, getting it approved, and then build their own houses on it, and not sell individual lots off. And so, in that model, you've got somebody that, the two gentlemen I'm thinking of, they started small, building one spec house at a time. So they just built it, put it on the market, worked with a real estate agent that they liked, sold it, moved on to the next one. And then over the years, bought more equipment, bought a little more land, and it just snowballed into sort of where they're at now, where they're quite large companies that employ a lot of people and own a lot of their own equipment, and and they're committed to being here in Whatcom County, being in the city of Bellingham, because they believe home ownership builds better communities. Because if you've put down roots, you've put down your hard-earned money for a down payment, you're going to be more connected to your neighborhood. You're going to be more connected to your town. So we have more of that happening in Bellingham and in the rest of Whatcom County. It's companies that have grown from small one-man operations to much larger companies. They get the raw land. They invest significant amount of money. It's to bring on how many lots are here in Sea Smoke? 30 somewhat?
40 in phase 1 and 79 planned for phase 2. Yeah.
Right. So that's a significant amount of money and risk that the investment group that has purchased the land and developed phase 1 and built the homes. And so, those folks aren't looking to move on to Boise, Idaho and buy another big chunk of land, or go to, Skagit and do that. They're invested here. And I've met one or two of them, and they're longtime Whatcom County residents. So we really don't have any of those big corporate entities that operate in Whatcom County. Some then, like I mentioned, some of it is just because it's too hard.
Yeah.
I'm, as an executive officer of a local association, I have 19 counterparts in the rest of Washington State. And, as I talk to them, the common trend is always, boy, I'm glad I don't live in Whatcom County, specifically because it's hard to build, not because of it's not an awesome place here, but they just go, wow, how do your guys and gals get it done? So we sort of have this reputation of being pretty committed to building where we live, which I think is awesome.
Yep. Couldn't agree more on that. And you had touched on, and I don't know who specifically you're talking about, but when you talk about someone building, like starting out from, one or two spec builds, and spec builds meaning that they are taking market trends, they have an idea of what sells, they have an idea of what their margins are going to be, and it's not a custom home, but it's speculative, right? How could, like, for people that are investors, but they want to get into that world, how would you recommend, like, what's the DIY kit for starting out as a developer? Who do you talk to? Where do you go at the county? Just things like that.
Yeah, certainly with developing that one, you'd need to find a mentor, because it's a little trickier. If you wanted to say you've got money and you're like, I don't like the stock market, but I think I want to do a spec house. Certainly you can take classes at Whatcom Community College, or a class that really is a contractor class that'll teach you the process, of which subs come in when, and those sorts of things. But really, I'd recommend finding a builder that you like and offering, to be a partner on a project. And now some will be like, no thanks, not interested. But there are builders out there that to have a third or fourth side project, where somebody else is the money and they're the sweat equity. There's definitely folks out there like that. I imagine in your industry, there's realtors that do that as well, that have builders and they partner together and either do a remodel and flip a house, or jump in on a spec and build new.
Yeah, absolutely. You had touched on briefly, an inventory issue, and some say it's a crisis, some say it's it's an issue, whatever the word is you want to put on it. It definitely is. It's dramatically affecting our economy, especially with our average income in Whatcom County being, is it right around 40 grand a year?
Mm-hmm.
Which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the challenge is the cost of living. What do you see in your world as the right trajectory, or one of the options for solving that crisis?
Yeah, well, certainly more inventory. It's basic economics 101 that we all took in college. It's if you don't have a lot of supply and there's demand, then the prices are going to be high. It's not, the builders don't generally set their price, right? They're gonna, most builders I know work with a real estate agent that they know, like, and trust, and they get most of their listings, and they look, they trust you guys to look at comps and say, hey, I think the right price is X. You mentioned in a video with a house a couple of doors away that it was priced at a certain price, and due to COVID and, this and that and the other thing, you've softened the price a bit. It isn't a yard sale by any means, but it's come down, X%. And so you find the right price for the right time. But certainly if we had, say, all 40 homes were built out in phase 1, and you guys were prepping lots for phase 2, the pricing could be different. Right? It might even be lower because there's more units, and so the builder's like, well, I'll take this profit margin at this time. So certainly that's going to be a fix. We need, I'm sure you've heard it in your industry, but in ours, we have this term, the missing middle. We don't have a lot of condos around because builders weren't building them because the legislature hadn't acted on some liability problems that were there. And they've changed that legislatively now so that builders can't be sued, 10 years later for a roof issue or whatever. It just was really tilted against the builder, if you will. And so a lot of our builders just weren't building them. But, as a young married, when we were here in Bellingham, that would have been what we would have looked for as our first entry into ownership, would have been a condo or a townhome. We just don't have any. All we've got are rentals, and we don't have enough. I mean, we keep building these huge rental developments, and yet the vacancy rate is still, at 0.06% or something crazy. Yeah. So you've really only got rentals, and then jumping into home ownership. And like you mentioned, the average for Whatcom County is now what price?
Well, the average in Whatcom County is definitely in the low fours now. Yeah, high threes,
okay.
Fours. Yeah.
Right. So the average in Bellingham is probably higher than that.
Yeah. Closer to high fours. Yeah.
Right. So we just don't have a lot of that middle for entry level or that first jump. Right. A couple's lived in a condo for a couple of years. They've decided to start a family, and they want to get, whatever that first sort of Cornwall Park or lettered streets, 3 bedrooms, so they can have a nursery and a whatever. Well, they can't make that jump because they're just going from renting to, a really big mortgage.
Yep.
So it's not only new home construction, but I believe we need to get, some townhomes and some condos and, sort of the mixed, like I'm from Vancouver, BC. So when you look up, just to the north of us in South Surrey, they've got really cool sort of brownstone type townhomes and really well thought through with lots of green space and walking paths that connect between developments. And, that sort of thing in the downtown core could be really compelling.
Yeah.
But,
Absolutely.
you've got to have developers that feel safe enough to take on a big project like that. And right now they're just sort of waiting to see what that legislative change actually does, because the banks won't lend on those projects because they're waiting to see, what the change in legislation does, et cetera, et cetera. So it could be a while before we see that.
See more of that mixed style. Yeah, absolutely. So for someone like you, when you look at an older home that's, in a core neighborhood in Bellingham, which, I won't throw out my opinion, but my opinion is, my opinion is that, we're very inflated in the core neighborhoods in Bellingham.
Right.
And I don't know about you, but I would much rather pay, somewhere in the, 220 to 250 or 260 a square foot for a brand new home than, 250 to 300 for an older home. Can you explain for people that are watching, when you look at price per square foot, how important is that in the judgment of whether it's a good deal or you will have some ability to appreciate in value?
Yeah, that's such a personal sort of idea, right? Because like I have friends that live in the lettered streets area, and they paid a lot of money for a really old house that needs a lot of work, but they're like, oh yeah, but we can walk to Elizabeth Station.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's their thing. They love the fact that they can meet friends with their kids and have a craft beer. They like the fact they can walk to the church that they go to, in the Fountain district. One of my friends teaches at Bellingham High School, and he rides his bike to work every day, not, necessarily because it's not an environmental thing for him. He just is like, this is awesome. I can be there in 6 minutes and, et cetera, et cetera. So it's such a personal thing because they looked at my wife and I as being, just off our rocker for living in Sudden Valley, because we were deep in the valley. But it was a brand new house, 11 years ago, and I wanted brand new for all the reasons that you do, want that. There's no honey-do list. There's, it's just a great house. And so our per square foot was much lower, and we got brand new, which is awesome. But it was 24 minutes, give or take, depending which lights I hit, to get to, my job in the Iron Gate Business Park. Right. So that's a personal decision. For me, it was way better and way better value and all those things. But for a lot of people, for them, the value is they're willing to pay a higher square foot in a not as nice a house, or in a house that needs a lot more work, over time, because they've made those personal choices to be close to things, in Bellingham, places that they can walk to, and parks that they're close to. And, for me, living in Semiahmoo, I love that I'm near the Spit, but I still drive to the Spit.
Yep.
Right. Because that's who I am.
Yep.
And if I really want to, come to Bellingham, I'm going to drive to go to Boulevard Park. It's those are the choices that I've made. That for me, for my money, the bang for the buck, if you will, I'm getting a lot of great square footage for not as much money.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's just coming down to a personal decision. Obviously,
Yeah.
For someone like me, I love the way those older homes look,
Yep.
but I don't need an art project. I grew up in a couple art projects. I'm from Seattle, so I grew up in a couple of those art projects where, I saw. Well, my dad basically would pull a string, and then him and I would just follow the string, and the string kept pulling this, that, and the other, and all of a sudden it's basically a new house. So for me, logically, it makes sense to, look at what that room is on a price per square foot basis. There's so many good builders in Whatcom County, and there's so many good tradesmen in Whatcom County. At the same time, how important is it still to get an inspection on a new home? Because I hear a lot of people that say, "Oh, it's a new home. We'll just do a walkthrough." Is that still important?
Absolutely. And I mean, I get the dilemma, right? I just bought this house, and I'm in my brain, I'm going, it's brand new. Why should there be anything wrong? But for the little bit of money that you spend comparatively, you're way better off getting the inspection done. It's going to find certain little things that probably aren't very expensive, but they're really going to annoy you, because you're already in the mindset that I bought a new house.
Yep.
Right? The roof shouldn't leak, or the carpet, should have a better edge than that, where it meets the tile, or, like in ours, there was some water in the crawl space. Well, I'm never going to go into my crawl space. Yeah. There's not a chance. So I never would have known it was there, but it's nice to have it in the contract. I have a year's warranty on this home. So you better believe coming up on a year, I'm going to have, my inspector go back down under the crawl space again and see if it's still there.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. I would never skip an inspection. It's some of the best money you're ever going to spend.
Absolutely. And they're usually no more than, between $400 and $600. I mean, obviously depends on the inspector and the size of the house and whatnot, but.
Yeah, exactly. And, we were lucky enough to use a realtor who's also a builder. And so he, did the inspection himself.
Jack of all trades.
What's that?
Jack of all trades.
Absolutely. So it was great, because he's going to look at it with a construction eye.
Yep.
So yeah, I just felt very fortunate that he insisted we do an inspection, and it really is, as a percentage of what you're spending, it's minuscule, and it'll save you tons of heartache later. And especially if it's not a new house, it's absolutely imperative, because people can hide all kinds of stuff very quickly. Right.
Most homeowners just have no idea.
Yeah.
So
because they bought and they didn't do an inspection, and so on and so on and so on.
Yeah. So for you, you mentioned a builder's warranty. How important is that? And is that standard with when you buy a new home? Is that usually pretty standard with new construction?
Yeah, most of the folks that I know in the industry, offer that, because the reality is they view, if you're purchasing, they view you as a client, and their hope is that you're gonna refer them to friends and family, and on and on and on. And most of the folks that I know that are members, and the folks that aren't members but that I rub shoulders with and talk about joining our association, they're all very customer centric. Sometimes builders and developers get a bad rap. Everybody thinks they're in it just for the money, et cetera, et cetera. And granted, they want to build a thriving company and take care of their families, but they really do care about what the client wants. Like you mentioned trends earlier, like when somebody's going to build a speculative house, they've got to know what the consumer wants out there, right? Like countertops, we've gone from Formica 30 years ago to, granite is sort of out now and quartz is in, and, on and on and on. So these guys and gals, when they build houses, they really are paying attention to serve their clients well, not just to sell a house, but have that family move in and go, wow, we just love all the thoughtful touches in this place.
Absolutely.
Those things are really important in caring for our clientele. I mean, you guys see it all the time when you walk through houses. You see folks that have paid attention and those that have sort of missed it.
Yeah. Yeah. And warranties are incredibly important for us too. Just it's part of closing. We send our clients off with a home warranty. Our builder does a warranty. We just know that within the first, 3 to 8 months, 3 to 9 months of home ownership, that's when everything starts falling apart. Not really falling apart, but everything starts becoming, it's the joys of home ownership is what I meant to say.
Well, you start noticing stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like we were through the particular home we bought 4 or 5 times.
Yep.
And, I just noticed something the other day in the shower pan. It's chipped, right? I'm sure it happened when they were setting it and, whatever. Well, it's going on the list because, we want it sort of fixed up and taken care of. And the builder knows that there's going to be a list. And, if he's been in the game long enough, it doesn't surprise him. It doesn't bug him. It's just part of the deal. So yeah, as the longer you live in a home, the more you sort of notice things. And it's just, yeah, to me, it's just part of the deal. And if you're buying a brand new home and the builder is not offering a warranty, move on.
Yeah. Or write in the offer to request that they include one.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on home ownership and the importance of it. I can speak personally that home ownership, as a young couple, my wife and I buying a home, I've quite literally borrowed money at early points in my business from the equity in my home to keep my business running. Mm-hmm. And for you and your family, how important has homeownership been for you? And how important is it for other people that are maybe in a position where they could afford, but they don't understand how important it is? What has homeownership done for you, and how important is it to other people?
Sure. Yeah, well, I grew up, like I mentioned earlier, in Vancouver, BC. My dad was a builder. And so, very early on financially, he was trying to impress on my brother and I the importance of not throwing your money away monthly by renting, right? Giving it, that was his terminology, was giving money to somebody else when you could be paying yourself, with a mortgage. And so, my early career was with Nordstrom. We lived in Seattle in the early 90s. And so the market was just starting to heat up down there. And we were able to, get in and essentially pay about what we would be paying for mortgage and what we'd be, paying for rent elsewhere. So it was great. Then we moved to Bellingham, and I worked for a nonprofit for about 23 years. And part of the employment agreement was that you lived on site in one of their homes. And so we were out of the market for quite some time. And then finally, about 11 years ago, said, okay, we really I feel like we're getting left behind. And so it was important for me to be able to jump, back into home ownership, which is why we bought, in the Valley, because we got more for our money. And that's just sort of how I'm put together, is I'm always going to try and get the most bang for my buck. And then we decided it was time to leave the Valley for lots of reasons, and sold in October, and then rented for a little while because we were looking to build, but it didn't work out. And so then we shifted gears to, start looking in various areas and various developments, and finally found the home that we liked and the area that we liked. And so we're back in, and it's important to me to be paying myself instead of paying a landlord and paying off his investment. So yeah, for me personally, it's been very important to get back in. And you and I've talked about Sea Smoke as a development, and we're looking to put, this is a 10 to 12 year house for us, and excited about putting down roots, excited about seeing the rest of the development built out so that we can get to know neighbors and those sorts of things. So
Absolutely. And so for you, when you were looking around with your agent, you have connections with builders in all corners of the county.
Yep.
And developments. How did you land on Semiahmoo? How did you land on Sea Smoke? What was the deciding factor for you?
Yeah. Well, we actually were looking at building above Drayton Harbor in Semiahmoo, and we couldn't get a deal done on the lot, and it sort of fell apart. The timing was not great, because the rental we had was only till June of this year. And so we recognized that even if we found a lot that we liked, sort of in North County, which is where we wanted to be. My folks live in White Rock, and they're in their 80s. And so it's good for me to be a little bit closer than Sudden Valley was. And my wife's parents live in Ferndale. So North County was sort of where we wanted to be. And certainly where we lived in the Valley, we didn't see a lot of sunsets. And out here, near the Spit, we get really spectacular sunsets. So that was important. We had a 2,500 square foot house. We had 3 children and a foster son for a number of years. And so we didn't need that big a house. And certainly the floor plans here in Sea Smoke, the single story, master on the main, well, we only have a main floor. So, main floor living was really attractive. The covered outdoor living space was really attractive, being not even a mile from the Spit, very attractive. So it just checked a lot of boxes. And then of course the price was a little bit more than we were in the 410 range in Sudden Valley, and we're in the mid 4s here. So it wasn't a huge stretch that way. So yeah, we just got real excited and saw it a number of times, looked at almost every house here. There's 2 that we never sort of went through with our realtor, but settled on the one we liked and agreed on a price, and away we went.
Absolutely. Well, we're grateful to have you within the development, and especially being a spokesperson within the builder community. Very much appreciate that. And yeah, we're all in this together, because we have 7 actually coming up that were recently purchased by a builder that I brought in, and so that's what we're waiting on right now, is being able to apply for permits. And so it sounds like that hopefully should be able to happen soon, but nothing for sure. So that, just to clarify, that would fall within phase 2, right?
Yeah, and that would. So it sounds like if you've got agreed upon floor plans and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, City of Blaine, from our dealings with them, they get permits through pretty quickly. So I don't think that's going to slow you guys down at all. And we're hoping by, say, Wednesday of next week, hopefully earlier, but I'm thinking probably Wednesday or Thursday next week, that Governor Inslee will take the work group document and recommendations for new projects. So ones that haven't broken ground yet, and that we'll be able to get on those, as early as hopefully middle of next week. And
Yeah.
then some of the cities and counties are going to have a bit of a catch up process because they've all been working from home. So it's going to take a little while to sort of get the machine moving again. But I don't sense that it's going to be a long process.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we actually used your floor plan as one of the plans that we were going to replicate again. So if anybody is curious about that, it's a very attractive floor plan, like Rob was saying, and that's awesome. So Rob, thank you so much for joining me today. Do you have any advice for people right now? Because we're in this pivot period, right? This is the whole purpose of this show. For builders, for people within your world, what message would you like to pass along to them as the leader of their association?
Yeah, I'm just really excited that between ourselves and the state association that we were able to work with the governor. It didn't look great for a long time there. It really felt like the governor was almost against our industry, but they were able to get a process together that he and his state health department were able to sign off on. So I'm just so excited that our members and the whole industry can get back to work and start earning a paycheck and supporting their families. None of these guys wanted the loans from the government. They didn't want what they would call a handout. They just want to work and take care of their clients. So super excited. If you are not a member and you sort of like what you've heard, give us a shout. We think joining the association is great for the industry because as we all work together, I work really closely with the Realtors Association and your executive officer, Perry Eskridge.
Yeah, it's great.
We've heard the overused term, we're all in this together, but certainly in our industries, we rely heavily on each other, right? We need great product built and we need great realtors that take care of their clients and usher them through the process in a way that's productive and protective for them.
Yeah, the lobbying is, there's a lot of other benefits of being a part of an association, but the lobbying is by far that, like, people don't really understand how important that is. And
Yeah.
So much appreciated to you and your community for that, and then also our local association for that as well. And we so much appreciate you being on the show here on the Pivot Series, the Building Bellingham Pivot Series. As far as finding you, for people that are within the trades world, how can people best reach out to you to sign up as a member, become a member? Where can we find you on social media?
Yeah. Well, BIAWC has a Facebook page, Builders Industry Association of Whatcom County, or you can hit us up at biawc.com, and we'll have all the information there for you, as well as information on state and local happenings. We've got all the documentation that the governor's put out. So yeah, or pick up the phone and give us a call. Even though we're working remotely, all of our phones ring in our homes, and our staff can help you out.
The phones still ring. I love it. Yeah, yep. It's perfect. And just so for everybody that's watching, all links for the BIAWC will be in the link or in the comments below. So I'll just go ahead and post those all below so people can find you. Rob, thank you so much for joining me today. We will also be hosting at an undetermined date at this point, Rob and some builders and some tradesmen of the industry on a group call. So stay tuned for the announcement of when that will be. And thanks for joining us today on the Pivot Series. Awesome. All right, so we are going to stop the live stream. Boom.